All right, I'm live. This is TJRS, interview number, I think, 4. And I'm here with Nathan J. Robinson, the founder, editor of Current Affairs Magazine, the author of best-selling or best-known book, I should say. I'm holding it up, Why You Should Be a Socialist, and the author of the forthcoming book. It's in my notes. I need to turn the page. Uh, Responding to the Right, brief replies to 25 conservative arguments, coming out in February, and we will get to that towards the end. First of all, Nathan, how you doing?
Hey, nice to be with you. Everything's good. I'm in New Orleans. We had a tornado yesterday, but the tornado spared the current affairs offices. So I'm doing all right.
Oh man, I'm so sorry for that. Well, I live in Kansas City, so I kind of
Oh, okay.
stay.
So you're familiar with the concept,
Yeah,
the concept of the tornado. A
yeah.
little rare here, but when it comes through, it's pretty scary.
Oh God, I mean, every summer it's just like NOAA Weather Radio is your go-to, or my go-to anyway. So I guess we'll just get right to it. And some of these questions I've kind of written down spur of the moment. And so, really, for those who are probably familiar with Current Affairs Magazine, it's been around for, I believe, 7 years. If I'm not
Yeah, I
correct.
think so. Yes, because we founded end of 2015, beginning of 2016. So
So, I mean, great, yeah, 7 years. That's a really long time if you really think about it. So I guess for those who aren't familiar, you started current affairs when you were a student at Harvard. Is that correct?
yeah. Yeah, so
And
I
how?
was in a PhD program in sociology and social policy, and I really was not enjoying graduate school. And the thing about academic writing is that nothing you write will ever be read by anyone. And I didn't like that. I wanted to write for a slightly larger audience so I could feel useful to the world. So this came about during my disaffected years in grad school.
Yeah, I'm in school myself. I'm in my next to last year, and I'm studying journalism. If you can think about it, not really getting anywhere with that at the moment. I've done job shadowing with several local news stations, and it really didn't click. So I kind of resorted to doing the streaming, the podcasting, the blogging, the modding, that kind of thing. It's been doing it for a year, so it's been
Yeah.
pretty good so far. So, what was the process, if you don't mind me asking, of the start of current affairs?
Yeah, so the first thing is I had been doing blogging
Mm.
usually every couple days. I wrote some political blog posts, and I'd also been doing freelance writing for a number of different publications, and I'd also been making these sort of weird. The weird part is I was making these little satirical children's books, these little like parodies of children's books, and I was doing them because they were creative. They were like a design thing. I got to draw them. I got to, they were just fun. I made one about a group of libertarians who get stuck on an island together. I wanted to find some way of combining the things that I was doing, right? The thing that was like really very visual, making this like satirical, this parody material, the political analysis. And I thought, well, okay, why don't you make a prototype of a magazine? Because a magazine could combine, you could do fake ads for things, you could do, non-existent products and such, and you could do little comics, but you could also do very serious political analysis. So why don't you try mocking up a magazine and see just see how it comes out. So I took the month of September 2015, and the first thing I did was I went down to the newsstand, a newsstand that has since disappeared, sadly. Um, and I bought a big stack of magazines. So my question to myself was, how do you actually what is a magazine made of? What are the sections of a magazine? How do you take something that is a Word document with a bunch of text of your opinions and make it look like a professional magazine? So I tried to teach myself over the course of that month to be a designer and how to design a magazine. And so I sort of reverse engineered from a stack of existing magazines. Rather than going out and taking a class or anything like that, I just looked at magazines and I opened Adobe InDesign and I wrote some articles under fake names. And then at the end of that very intense month of work, I had this thing printed, and it was 85 pages, and it was not great, but it was good enough to where when I showed it to people, they went, "That's really cool. Are you gonna do more of those?" And I went, "I hadn't really thought about it, but yeah, okay." So I
Right.
started a Kickstarter campaign with my roommate, and Kickstarter campaign got funded, and the magazine took off from there.
Oh, wow. So you're just your own businessman, essentially.
Yeah, it's pretty much I still design every page of current affairs myself. Like this is very much I have a co-editor who works with me, but we are the only two full-time staff. So current affairs tries to project the image of being much larger than we actually are. We try
Mhm,
and with the name and with a very professional aesthetic, we want people to take us seriously as a national magazine. But if you come
mhm.
down to New Orleans, what you'll see is that the current affairs office is very, very, very small, and it's still a tiny operation.
Compared to, like, say, Newsweek or Time, and a
Yes.
lot of those publications are, like,
Yeah.
still, like, kind of I don't know, like, I think Time is still in print, but I think Newsweek's since gone online.
Oh, have they?
Or
Everyone's going online on that. Yeah.
magazines are really dated, or they're just, like,
It's true. It's
physical
true.
physical magazines are,
Who
like,
reads?
I I adore them. I'll just say that. I mean, I am a
Yeah.
creature of habit as far as, like, having something physically in your hands to read as opposed to reading it online.
Yeah.
Not that not that I am opposed to reading news articles and stuff online. I do that a
Yeah.
lot, but I
Yeah.
still like the page turning and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. Then
So,
thank goodness there are enough people like you to where current affairs can stay in business.
well, I hope so. I mean, of all places, I mean, I've tried finding the magazine at my local bookstore, and of all places, Barnes and Noble, which I wouldn't really recommend, but because there are far better bookstores than that, believe me. But it's still not stocked.
Well,
So,
no, but I actually that's our fault. So the first two issues of Current Affairs were actually stocked in 400 Barnes and Nobles around the country,
mhm,
and so it's actually really easy to get into Barnes and Noble. We could be stocked in Barnes and Noble. The problem was that first they take an enormous cut. So most magazines don't care about the cover price because they are making most of their money on advertising. So
mhm,
you buying the magazine, or you paying a subscription fee, that's not where the money is. It's in the ads. We're
mm,
different because we don't have any ads, so we depend on the money. And so when
mhm,
Barnes and Noble and the distributor took something like 50% of the cover price.
mhm,
And so with that, plus the fact that just organizing the distribution to 400 Barnes and Nobles every 2 months for a tiny operation like ours was not really feasible, and they don't pay you for like 9 months. We were just not
wow,
able to coordinate it. So I'd love to get back in Barnes and Noble. It's just a matter of when Current Affairs has the size of operation to where we
right.
can handle the whole thing.
And like you said, you're kind of like in a small operating office with only you and another editor. So, until that changes in some way,
Yeah.
you'll be able to uh, be in bookstores, not just Barnes and Noble, but obviously everywhere else. Because I mean, I just recently discovered they stock Jacobin, which I'm now
Yeah.
a subscriber to. So,
Yeah.
and I just re-upped my subscription. So I'm looking forward
Jacobin's
to that.
great. Well,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I mean, fantastic. I mean, you and Bhaskar Sankara, I think I really can't compare. I mean, you have similar ways of how you started your magazine, so I think that's
No,
really it.
well, here's the funny thing is that when I was starting Current Affairs, I basically just copied everything that Bhaskar had done because
Mhm,
they had started, I think, 5 years before us.
Right.
because I think they were around the time of Occupy, and
Right.
I just thought when I had this prototype, and I thought, well, how do you start a magazine? I thought, well, just do whatever, just look at whatever Jacobin does, and just do that. So we
Mhm.
hired their printer, we hired their web designer to just imitate. We still use the same subscription management system
Right.
as Jacobin, so there's a lot of overlap in how the two operate because I was just shameless in copying everything they did to succeed.
Mhm. I mean, you basically stole Jacobin's staff, so to speak, but, I mean, I hope Boschkar was
Well,
okay with
no,
it.
they're contractors, so they still do work for Jacobin and
Right,
us at the same
right,
time. I didn't poach their web designer. I just
right,
hired their web designer.
right, right. So, yeah, I mean, well, if I mean, good thing Boschkar knew about it, because
Yeah,
I
he's a nice guy. He was
yeah,
always very supportive of us, and he could have seen another left magazine as a competitor and wanted to crush
mm,
us, but he had a very leftist approach to the whole thing, which was that
mhm,
he thought that what we were doing was valuable and what they were doing was valuable, and he saw that there was room for both. And I think that we kind of help each other because I've published in Jacobin before. Jacobin
mhm,
writers have come on the Current Affairs podcast or published for us. Um,
mhm,
Sometimes when articles have been rejected by Jacobin, people bring them to us and we accept them. Not I think because we have lower standards, but because there are some things that just aren't quite right for Jacobin, but are good for us.
mhm.
So I think actually having the two magazines, us even though we're much smaller than Jacobin, has been good for both.
But you're smaller than Jacobin, but your height and like the size of the magazine is much, as I've seen, is much huger than Jacobin. If you like compare height and width, um,
Oh, you mean physically?
yeah, physical of like
Yes.
if you have a physical copy of Current Affairs
Okay.
put aside with
Look,
Jacobin, you would literally a bigger copy, and I'm just like, oh.
circulation wise, we may be smaller, but actually, I think I'll brag about that. Bigger than Jacobin.
Oh, well, I'll just try to keep this from Boschkar. I don't know. No, no,
They need to
I
add some inches.
no, I respect him,
Yeah, I do immensely.
tremendously. He's also now the president of the nation, so,
Right.
um,
Another
so
excellent publication.
which got me started on one of the starts of my journey in the left, which, I kinda wanna ask you about, because you define yourself as a libertarian socialist, if I'm
Yeah.
correct. Like, I'm more, I guess you would say, the other side of, like, democratic socialism. But we're also, I think we have something in common in respect to Noam Chomsky.
Yeah.
And so I was actually doing my research. I was actually like psyched to see that you cited him as an influence in your like upbringing
Yeah.
as you were coming up. So I guess I
Yeah.
probably answered that question already, but how would you define yourself, particularly
Well,
as a
yeah,
socialist,
and
particularly left?
Chomsky's been a wonderful supporter of current affairs. He was a subscriber early on. Said nice things about us. Had co-wrote an article with me for the magazine. Has come on. He's just a great guy, and so, definitions. What label are you going to apply to yourself? I'll
Right.
apply democratic socialist one day and libertarian socialist the next. Both of them are kind of trying to do the same thing, both of those
Hmm.
labels, right? Which is they are trying to add an adjective to socialist in order to distinguish the kind of socialist politics you believe in and practice from the impression of socialism as something that is authoritarian and associated with Stalinism and the Soviet Union. And so they
Hmm.
both are an emphasis on either democracy, or the libertarian socialist is the emphasis on sometimes libertarian socialists are completely outright anarchists. They don't believe in any government at all. But, all people who use that label share in common a commitment to civil liberties, to, protecting individuals from the authoritarian overreaches of the state and making sure there's a strong sphere of private conduct that is not interfered with by the police and the prison system. And they're trying to
Hmm.
emphasize that we are just as critical of police and prisons as we are of the corporate structure.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would identify more as a democratic socialist just
Sure.
by default, and in regards to like the things that people like Bernie Sanders are putting on the table as far as tuition-free college, Green New Deal,
Yeah, I'm
lower,
for all of that.
yeah, like $15 minimum wage. I mean, that's a big thing, especially now with these unions that have been cropping up, these supporting for striking workers, specifically in the railroad industry, which I'm sure Current Affairs has covered, like many other left magazines, quite extensively.
Well, we actually haven't managed to cover the rail the rail dispute specifically. I mean, we do labor coverage regularly, but the thing is, the really frustrating thing is that because there are only two of us, we're very limited in what we can
Hmm.
cover. So we're really relying on heavily what people are submitting articles to us on. And if no one submits an article on the threatened rail strike, then we don't have anything to publish on it. So it's actually very hard to cover as a tiny publication all of the things you wish you could cover. Jacobin does a much better job of it because the Jacobin publishes, I think. Jacobin publishes 5 or so articles per day, whereas
Right.
Current Affairs publishes about that per week
Right. I mean,
on
and
a good
plus they
week.
have a, yeah, well, they have a presence online also in print. So like you go on the Jacobin website, there's like a new article on the homepage like every hour,
Yeah.
which is pretty good. I mean, again, like compare and contrast. I mean, you guys are equally as good. So I really can't pick my favorites. I mean, if I could, I would get a subscription to both Current Affairs and Jacobin because I like both sides of the pie, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, no, as I say, I think they complement each other really well. I
Yeah.
think that they're different kinds of magazines. They don't compete. It's quite interesting actually that we've both managed to create pretty good leftist magazines that really don't feel the same. Because you
Mhm.
might think that two leftist magazines covering politics in the United States from a roughly democratic socialist perspective would end up saying
Mhm.
all the same things, but I don't think we do, because we actually consciously think sometimes to ourselves, well, okay, this article seems like it would be better for Jacobin. It's not a Current Affairs article, it's a Jacobin article. So there are kind of categories of things where that something's more them and something's more us.
So, like for example, when an article is written for Jacobin specifically, and I don't know who it is, like Boschkar or somebody says, "Hey, this is not right for us." What's the process in which somebody like, okay, this article isn't good for Jacobin, so we'll just go over to Current Affairs. What's that process like? Does that person who has written that article come to you directly and say, I had this idea for this article for Jacobin, and they didn't really think it was a good piece for them at that time, and so I want to publish it in Current Affairs instead. Like, how is that process worked?
Well, we have a pitch form. The way we get most of our articles is that there's an online form that people fill out. It's linked on our Twitter if people want to check it out. And it has a writer's guide that says the kinds of things that we're looking for, and it asks you to fill out what you'd like to write on, why you think you're qualified to write on it. What your background in the subject is, what you'd like to say. It asks you for some writing samples. So, no, I think it's probably happened that someone has said directly that another publication didn't want it, but usually they don't say that. Usually, because I think that from the writer's perspective, they may fear that by saying this piece has been rejected elsewhere, you're raising an editor's suspicion, going, well, if they didn't want it, we certainly don't. We don't want other places. We don't want their cast offs.
Right, right.
But but that's not actually how I feel. I don't feel that because an article has been, in fact, some of our best articles have been rejected at 10 different places before people came to us. And the reason is that they're pretty unconventional articles, and editors at other places have looked at them and gone, I don't really see this doesn't they're just for their publication it doesn't fit, but for us we ask writers to bring the stuff often that nobody else will publish, and sometimes that produces great results.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen before how like a lot of articles, like really great like investigative reporting articles have been written for a certain publication. And usually there is like a sort of conflict of interest and there's like, hey, we can't
Yeah,
publish this article because of X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, oh, we'll just kind of sit on it for a while and then refresh it and then take it to another organization and where it'll hopefully be published, which
yeah.
usually what happens. I mean, that's the nature of print journalism. And as a writer myself, as a blogger, I mean, I'm self-published, so I don't work for anybody but myself. So if I was to work for an organization, I probably would run into that sort of avenue in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah.
So like you're obviously very political on the left. I mean, you've done really great writing for the last, I don't know, 7 years again, since that's how long current affairs has been around. But so I also know you're from the UK originally, which I've always
Yeah.
wanted to go to. I've
Oh, you
never been
should.
to the
You should.
I mean, it's a bucket list item to go with a friend. Just do like a world traveling
Yeah.
uh, around the world. So how would you? I guess I could say, what was your, if you don't mind me asking this question, like what was your upbringing in the UK that led you down to your leftist belief as a socialist, so to speak?
Well,
I
the funny
hope
thing,
that's not
yeah,
too
no,
personal, by the
no,
way.
no, no. I'm happy to answer it. I'm not very good at answering personal questions a lot, but I don't mind
Neither am
them.
I.
Um, but my upbringing actually was not really in the UK. Because my parents, we moved to Florida when I was 5. So I have this sort
Wow.
of these lingering remnants of a British accent. And it sort of gets stronger or weaker depending on who I'm talking to. When I'm talking to
Mhm.
Americans, I sound more American. When I'm talking to my parents, I sound very, very, very British. And when I start thinking about it, I'll probably start sounding more British now because as I start thinking about it, the accent changes.
Right.
It's very odd how it works. So I grew up mostly in Florida, and my left politics were definitely shaped by my experiences in Florida. So I went to a uh, a public school in Sarasota, Florida, called Pineview School, which is it's a fantastic school, but it is a almost entirely white school, and it is the kind of magnet school. And what they do is students who show academic promise are sent to the
Mhm.
good public school so that they can be prepared for college. Um, and
College prep.
it's a great school, but you immediately notice that it doesn't reflect the demographic, or you notice, if you're a person who notices things, which and a lot of people that don't notice, that it doesn't reflect the demographics of Sarasota itself. And so it was actually first through getting curious about racial injustice that I
Mhm.
started to develop a sense that something wasn't right around me, that things weren't the way that they ought to be. And I was a volunteer at an organization called the Teen Court in Sarasota, which is a diversionary program where teenagers kind of play the roles of attorneys and jurors in figuring out what some teenager who has been arrested on their first offense, like what their sentence should be. And usually they're just sentenced to come back for jury duty at the teen court itself. But I was a
Mhm.
defense attorney at the teen court as a 14-year-old for in this kind of mock trial situation, although they're real cases. It's a very kind of odd program, but it's tremendous fun. But there I started to see, we would get the case of the black 10-year-old girl who had been arrested at school by the police for like throwing
Mhm.
a tantrum.
Mhm.
And I knew that at my school, they wouldn't bring the police in if a 10-year-old had a tantrum. but at other schools they would. And so these sorts of things started to make me angry. And
Right.
there was a big fight when I was in high school over Planned Parenthood used to be the ones who got to come in and do the sex ed. Uh,
Mhm.
and the conservative parents in Florida got very, very angry. And I think I completely successfully kicked Planned Parenthood out of the school, but there was a huge fight over it that I was kind of part of at the time. I was on the staff of the school newspaper in high school, and I had opinions about everything. And I got into clashes with the administration over censorship of the school paper. So, I developed a kind of nascent radicalism pretty early on in my life through being first kind of disquieted by things that seemed very unjust. And whether my
Mhm.
perspective as an outsider who wasn't really American contributed to that, I don't know. But in school, I always had a very, very strong British accent. I was always like a British child in Florida. And
Mhm.
so I always was kind of marked as an outsider. And then, yeah, so seeing things that were unjust and then getting into fights with authority figures were kind of important to my growth and development.
Well, that's actually really good. I mean, fighting with authority figures is what most of the left does. I
Yeah,
mean
exactly.
I've had my share of, clashes with authority figures, specifically on my own local high school newspaper. I mean, that
Yeah.
was, I can't tell you, I mean, hours upon hours of opinion pieces I've written, which have now been discarded in history about, you know, my own my own, evolving, history as I was growing up, being more and more politically
Mm,
myself on the left. And then, we would have to write, for example, we had a newspaper, and then we had an online opinion forum that we would always have to do. And I would always have to write one or two or three
mm,
opinions a week. And then sometimes I would get a good thumbs up. Other times it'd be kind of a nah, it needs more work. And then other times it'd be like, no, we got to get rid of this. And
mm.
when it was like, we got to get rid of this, I'm like, no, I'm fighting
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah.
This might not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And the majority of people, because it was going out all around the school on the official website, I'm like, majority of people will like this too if they actually take a minute to actually read and understand what X,
Mm,
Y, and Z topic is about.
mhm.
I won't go into specifics on what the topics were, but and we'd have to watch news and opinion on the smart board and whatnot. That was kind of my own just similar upbringing, just making comparisons. So
Mhm.
yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, that was
Yeah, a lot of
us.
us come about through with that kind of a route.
So I guess the other thing that kind of ties into this question, outside of Chomsky, obviously. I mean, we could go on and on about how, great he is, or how we could agree or disagree on, what sort of things that, because there's a whole hour or so I could spend on Chomsky, but that's probably for another time maybe. But outside of him, who were your influences? Probably one as a writer that got
Yeah.
you started doing this magazine, and also politically, that motivated you to your, I guess I would say, leftist beliefs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I'm, being perfectly honest, my main political influence was a guy who's my best friend, Paul Water Smith, who I went to high school with, and he was a bit older than me, and he had read Chomsky before I had, and introduced me
Mhm.
to political writing and like Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States,
Yep.
and he was much smarter than I was and knew a lot of things, and sort of gave me a political education, and we were on the debate team together in high school, and he kind of mentored me in my politics. He actually now serves on the board of Current Affairs, and has been a really strong supporter of me and a friend to me for my oldest, longest friend. So my actual most serious political influence was was my close friend, and there have been other friends, and there have been professors. I went to Brandeis as an undergrad, and there were a few professors there who were really just extraordinary. There was Richard Gaskins, who headed the legal studies program at Brandeis. I took a lot of courses with um, This guy named Mark Hulling who taught a class on Marxism and anarchism. And it was my first introduction to either Marxism or anarchism. I really didn't know
Hmm.
anything about either of them. And so when I took his class, it was about the kind of debate between the Marxists and the anarchists. And I thought it was totally fascinating. And so that got me deeper into left politics. Then there were other students at Brandeis who, I was in activist groups and started writing I wrote for one of the campus newspapers. And so my influences come from all over. They in terms of, I mean, there are political thinkers I could cite that are important to me. People like Peter Kropotkin and Emma Goldman, and this architectural theorist named Christopher Alexander, who I write about a lot. So I
Hmm.
have influences from all over the place. Just a conversation with someone can be an influence. Just hundreds of strands of knowledge that I've sort of picked up throughout my life that have helped to
Right.
form me.
Yeah, that's the same with me. I mean, you're perfect on Zen because like I just recently started reading A People's History of the United States, and it's probably one of the most fascinating books. Probably should,
Yeah.
in my opinion, at least be considered to be taught in a few college
Yeah.
campuses, and same with Manufacturing Consent, of course, with Chomsky. Although I hate to bring this up, but with this whole thing with Matt Taibbi and and like I'll just be honest, I'm just shocked because he was somebody who I respected as a aspiring journalist, and to see him go down this route. And he wrote in a Substack piece, I think last year, criticizing Noam Chomsky or Howard Zinn, and of course
Mhm.
Howard Zinn is deceased, so he can't defend himself. And I was just thinking, but like basically he said that book reads like like in his words, in Taibbi's words, a mental patient. And as I was thinking, like it doesn't. I mean, anybody who's
Yeah,
actually
right.
thoroughly sit down and actually tried to
That's
read
right.
some of Howard Zinn's work knows that this is probably one of the greatest thinkers next to
Yeah.
Chomsky himself. And it's just
No,
like,
that's right. One of the greatest historians that America has had because, he opened a lot of people's eyes to things that they just are never taught and don't know about their own history. People's history
mhm,
is not like an American history textbook, but it's a
right,
very important companion to any American history textbook because it shows you what's left out of the rest of the text. And
right.
it's an incredibly important book. Howard Zinn, I got to see him live at one point, got him to sign a book, and it's one of my prized possessions is my signed
Oh,
copy of what is almost a better or more valuable book, which is the companion volume to People's History, which is
hmm,
Voices of a People's History.
yep,
Um, which is just a compilation of the primary sources and all these wonderful speeches and writings and poems and songs from all of the people that he's writing about, so they can speak in their own voices. So that kind of project, is just immensely valuable in introducing people to all of these historical figures that have been completely neglected. It is, as I say, an eye-opening experience for anyone to dive into that book and go, why don't I know about this? I should know about this. And
right.
and to see someone just write it off or say this is a biased anti-screed against America, I don't know what he said, but um is very, very frustrating. And I share with you, I'm someone who has respected in the past a lot of Taibbi's work. He was one of the wonderful political writers around the time of Occupy who produced a lot of
Hmm.
really good analysis of the financial crisis. There was no one better to read on the subject of Wall Street than Matt Taibbi in circa 2009, 2010.
Right.
But once someone's trashing Howard Zinn, something's gone quite wrong.
Yeah, I read Hate Inc. and was like right before, like a year before this whole thing with his, I guess, association with Ben Shapiro is all I'm gonna say of what we've been seeing. And it's just like I just look at it much differently now than I did a year ago,
Yeah.
especially like him and his work just makes I mean, it makes no sense to me now. And again, it is sad
Well,
because it's like, as you say, a guy who was for lack of a better word, a crusading reporter, even though that's probably not the best word to describe him, is just like take this career and just thrown it down the rabbit
well,
hole.
no, I agree with that. I wrote an article. I actually wrote a very long article that was analyzing the recent work of Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald, which is
Yep.
called "How to End Up Serving the Right."
And I
And
read that too, and I actually agree with everything. I
yeah,
mean, same way with Greenwald.
so Greenwald's very similar, and the thing is, they're both people that I had at one point immense respect for. Of course, they would say that they haven't changed, that now it's these intolerant liberals who can't handle their hard truths. But I think that in that article, what I attempted to do is go through and prove that that's not the case, and that in fact they have in recent years begun saying things that are not accurate or
Mhm.
true, things that are right-wing talking points, and they can
Right.
sound persuasive. Now, I'm sympathetic. Here's the way in which I'm sympathetic, or not. Well, not so terribly sympathetic, but I think we have to kind of understand these men as a case study. I think
Mhm.
they're not idiots. As I say, a lot of their work has been great. So if people who you think are not idiots can end up spouting nonsense right-wing talking points and just shouting about how liberals are, the woke liberals are trying to are the real authoritarians and they're trying to destroy free speech in this country. If someone ends up in that place, how do they end up there? And you mentioned earlier the upcoming book, and my upcoming book, Responding the Right, is in part an effort to explain not just why conservative talking points are wrong, but why
Mhm.
conservative talking points are compelling and persuasive to the point where you can have people in your life who you really like who end up sounding like a Republican.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually in a way looking forward to it because I do have several conservative-minded family members, and it's just like, maybe it'd be something for them to think about, really.
yeah, that's
But,
my hope.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I read the article about Taibbi and Greenwald. I mean, I respected them as well. I mean, Greenwald, for lack of a better term, he was more of a libertarian type bro. I mean,
Yeah,
he did good work in The Intercept when it was, but, like, now I'm just kinda like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know, I just don't really care, to be honest.
yeah.
But, I guess I guess the next question was, it kinda tied this into the beginning because it kinda relates, but, like, tell us about your start as a journalist. I mean, like, how did that come about,
Well,
so to speak, if that's,
Well, yeah. So first, some people call me a journalist. I don't call myself a journalist ever, because I associate journalists with being reporters. I'm like, I feel weird accepting the name journalist for what I do because it's so much like I call myself a political analyst or a political commentator. We could say that I'm
that's
a
probably
journalist.
better.
Certainly, some of what Current Affairs publishes qualifies as journalism, but it's a lot more sort of opinion writing that
Mhm.
that I do. I'm more an opinion writer, and the way I start in that is actually I was 17 years old, and I was this. So this was 2007, 2008. I think.
You're 3 years older than I am, so I was
Okay.
born in '92, so yeah.
So this was
We're both
and
millennials, so
and
just
I
saying.
was yes, the infamous millennials who no one likes because of our avocado toast eating habits. Um, I do eat avocado toast, and I'm not ashamed of it. I think it's delicious. I'm not gonna apologize for eating avocado toast. Uh,
I love toast, but I've never had avocado on it. I just
oh, okay.
put
Well, then
butter
you're not a
and
real millennial, are you?
oh, well, you may have to change my opinion now.
You gotta, you gotta.
Avocado
This is
toast.
this is the food of our generation. This is what all the reactionaries say. These millennials, they won't stop eating their expensive avocado toast, and they wonder why they're broke. But I have to say, my policy is avocado toast for all.
Yeah, there you
If they
go.
want it, if they, you don't have to eat avocado toast. Obviously, sorry, I'm getting distracted. So my start in writing was I was at the I was at the ACLU convention, and actually Glenn Greenwald was there, and it was the first time I met him. This was in like
Irony.
2008. And I went to an event at the same time at the museum, which I think is now closed. Maybe
Yeah,
not.
I
Maybe,
think it's closed.
yeah, the museum in Washington D.C. This museum, the temple to journalism, and
Right.
Ariana Huffington was there, and she was giving a talk, and I asked a question in the Q&A about the New York Times reporting on weapons of mass destruction in the lead up to the Iraq War. And I can't remember what the question was or what her answer was, but I do remember that she said to me, "That was a very good question. That was you're a smart young man," And I was like, "Ooh." She's since gone off into business, but at the time, the Huffington Post was like, very important as a political,
Right.
an outlet for political
Yeah,
commentary.
a news outlet, very
Yeah.
left-leaning news outlet.
Yeah, it was kind of at its peak at that point. So I went up to her after the event and I said, "Hey, I'm the kid who asked the good question. I'm the
Mhm.
smart young man." And she said, "Ah, yes, yes." She said, "You should blog for us." And I said, "Whoa,
Really?
oh." And she said, "Yes, here is my email. Email me." And so I emailed her, and she put me in touch with the guy who handles the blogging, and I blogged for the Huffington Post. And of course, I didn't realize at the time that Ariana Huffington, at the, who I certain degree grateful for giving me my start, but also at that
Mhm.
time kind of gave out blogs like she was handing out pieces of candy. Like
Mhm.
her hairdresser had a blog. Like wherever she went, if she just meet someone, she go, "Would you like a blog?" And you could go, "Yes, okay." And so the Huffington Post had thousands and thousands of bloggers at this point, and it was basically everyone Ariane Huffington had met. But for me, it was good because saying I'm a blogger at the Huffington Post was great. Although they didn't pay. The way you can have thousands of bloggers is to not pay them any money, which in
Mhm.
retrospect was exploitative and wrong,
Right, right,
because they made
definitely.
a ton of money off all these people. Um, and what I make sure we don't do at Current Affairs is if some 17-year-old comes along, take advantage of the fact that they're so excited to just be publishing anywhere and go, "Yes, and that's why we're not paying you." So, but the Huffington Post thing I did during college, I was blogging there, and then I just started occasionally contributing articles to other places, mostly not writing for publication though, mostly just doing just writing for class papers. And then
Mhm.
in law school I published a few more things for other places, and then in grad school I got serious about freelancing and submitting things, and I taught a writing class recently, and I'll teach it again. And it's a class on writing and publishing. And in that class, I kind of go through how I started pitching publications and what works and what doesn't when you pitch publications. So I spent a while kind of perfecting like how you talk to editors and get them to accept your pieces of writing.
So, and this was all freelance. Do you have
Yeah.
any, and this was 2007, so do you have any of those old blogs? Is
Oh
there any way
yeah, I
you
mean,
could
I think they're
find
still
some?
on the Huffington Post website. You could go on if you just Google Huffington Post Nathan Robinson. You can click and you have my bibliography. It's stuff that's not very good because I wrote it when I was 17,
Mhm.
but it's still on the internet. Everything lives forever. So
Everything, yeah. I'm just gonna do that right now. No, I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
no, you do it. My
That was a
first
joke.
piece was about my first or second piece was about what it's like to watch Fox News for 24 hours straight. I like watched
Oh
Fox News for
god.
24 hours straight. And wrote about what it was like. It was very, very painful and unendurable. And in fact, I failed. I went out and bought a sandwich before the 24 hours was up. Um, but
Speaking of that, I do have, oh, go ahead, finish your
no,
sentence.
I had no following thoughts. I just said
Oh,
but, and I didn't know what was coming afterwards.
well, actually, I was gonna say, speaking of Fox News, have you ever, I mean, this documentary's been out for, I think, 19 years. It'll be 19 years next year.
Yeah.
The
Without Fox?
documentary, yes, that's
Yeah,
the
it's
one I'm
really
talking
good.
about. Yeah, I mean, it's on YouTube for free, and it's like,
I
if I ever feel like I just want to be angry for whatever reason at
But
Republican politics, right-wing politics. I watched this documentary. I'm like, this is where it all started. I mean,
it's true,
now
yeah.
it's like you have OAN and you have Newsmax and like
Well, yeah,
you look you look at like what that documentary represented in our time, you know, almost 20 years ago. Uh,
right.
it's just it's evolved. I
No,
mean,
yeah, everyone watched
Riley's
that.
not there anymore, and like the guy that's like the curmudgeon, so to speak, is Tucker. It's
Well,
like
that's
it's
the thing. When you watch that documentary, one of the things that you kind of realize is that Fox has gotten worse.
mm,
Like the Fox
yeah,
of 2004 is almost mild compared with the Fox of today, and
2020.
like
Yeah,
like there's stuff I can't remember the documentary well, but there's stuff about how they like pose as neutral, but they aren't neutral, and it's like
no,
they
no,
gave up
no.
the pose. I think they abandoned like fair and balanced. They like that was the point at which they were pretending to be
Mhm.
fair and balanced. So like that was their
That
slogan,
was
and they
whole
had Chris
Roger
Wallace,
Ailes'
who was
yeah.
like respectable, and they had all these people who were trying to give a respectable face to Fox, and then they realized that that doesn't sell, and they were
Mhm.
just like, no, 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 let's just have angry demagogues come on and talk nonstop about how liberals are turning your children trans and letting hordes of immigrants into the country who are going to end your way of life or whatever they're talking about today.
Yeah,
That's
it's
probably it. That's probably what they're talking
yeah,
about.
that's pretty much all they do from sign on to sign off in this era. I mean, yeah, ugh, they're just disgusting. Um, what was I gonna oh, well, actually, the next thing is, before we get into the book, you're from or so you're from the UK, you lived
Yeah,
in Florida, you're based in New Orleans, never been there. I can see kinda why you're interested you love Florida, New Orleans because it's sunny, it's nice, so to speak.
yeah,
I mean, it rains a lot. I mean, I was in Florida, like,
yeah. It's wet.
pre-COVID, and, you know, it's like it rained the whole time. Like, I was in shorts the entire time, but it rained like hell.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
was used to it, right?
yeah.
Um, so I guess I say, what's it like down there? Just simple question.
What's it
What's it
like
like
down here?
In
Well,
New
New
Orleans?
Orleans is I mean, you know, you'd need another hour or so because New Orleans is just such a fascinating place, right? Because people here sometimes describe America as
Mhm.
something like it's another country. Like there's New Orleans and there's America, because New Orleans, they say, feels more like a little country in the Caribbean than it does like a city in the United States. Um, and that's because it has this mix of cultures that never was that American. It always had this mix of French and Spanish influence that you don't really get elsewhere in the country. There are all these fascinating, unique New Orleans cultural things like Mardi Gras and the Mardi
Of
Gras
course.
Indians, and the jazz music. I mean, Mardi Gras is crazy. It's such a crazy.
I imagine,
No,
yeah.
it's no, you can't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, John. You can't imagine, because I thought I could imagine before I'd been to Mardi Gras. And I wrote an
Right.
article called Mardi Gras in Theory and Practice, which is
Mhm.
about what Mardi Gras is really like. And
Mhm.
it shocked me how weird it was. It was really like nothing I could have expected. And because it's just so much effort put into like weeks of parades and parties, and you're like, what is this for? Nobody else in the country is doing
Right.
this. Why are you doing this? No one's doing it elsewhere. New Orleans is this weird mix though of like, you know, it's a poor city. It's got a lot of problems with racial injustice. You know, the
Mhm.
prison system in Louisiana is probably the worst in the country.
Right.
There's all sorts of, you know, there's all sorts of real serious problems here. It's like a dysfunctional, it's a very, very dysfunctional place. The only thing they do well is put on Mardi Gras. Um, so it is endlessly fascinating. The city of New Orleans, Louisiana is endlessly fascinating. There's nowhere else I'd want to be, because there's nowhere else where your day to day experiences are just full of are just so interesting. Like you're just meeting like very unique unique people. People come from all over the world to see this city. So you're meeting people from around the world. There are all these strange cultural traditions, like a day in which everyone, male and female, old and young, all wears like a red dress. There's a day
Mhm.
where called the running of the bulls, where I can't even describe that one. It's very strange. It doesn't involve actual bulls, but it's like the running of the bulls in Pamplona.
Right.
There's all this weird stuff in New Orleans. But you should
Right.
definitely visit. You should definitely come see it.
I hope to at some point. Yeah. So I'll just take what I said before. I can only imagine what
Yeah,
it's like doing Mardi Gras
I
as part of
can't
that.
even imagine is the correct way of putting it.
And as someone who is like a part-time writer, blogger, I'm big on grammar, and it just sometimes I slip up. Even the most
I'm
aspiring ones
horrible with
make
grammar.
mistakes.
My
I mean,
co-editor knows grammar, and I don't know any grammar. I'm like, I compare myself to like, there are musicians who can't read music.
mhm,
And I feel like I'm a musician who can't read music because I don't know any of the grammar rules, but I'm a good writer. So,
mhm.
so
All right. So let's move on
yeah,
to
sure.
the new book, the new
New
book
book,
that
yeah.
you're writing. I saw do you have a prototype on you, or is that
Somewhere in the giant stack of books behind me. I wish I could. I wish I'd thought to go find it, but I don't want to cause the stack of books to topple.
tumble?
Uh,
Yeah, that stack of books like it's gonna fall like at any minute.
it's very precarious and poorly built. So I don't want to go searching for the book. Otherwise, I'd hold up the cover.
Not a problem, not a problem. I found a prototype online, so at least there's actually a physical
Yeah.
copy of what the book looks like, as opposed to like a question mark saying "image not available"
Image not
on
found or
Google.
an image coming
Um,
soon. Yes, we do have
yeah,
a
that
cover.
kind of
We do
thing
have a
also
cover.
on Google. So the book is called "Responding to the Right: Brief Replies to 25 Conservative Arguments," and it's like this isn't similar because I know you've written critically of the Canadian, like, I guess he's a psychologist, Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
I'm not comparing it to this. It's just I couldn't help but think of like 12 New Rules, and I've
Yes.
never read a single thing of Jordan Peterson, and I never will because he's not my political
No.
he's not on my radar.
Yeah.
So no pun intended rising. Um, but like this like 25 conservative arguments kind of segued with the
Sure.
whole 12 new rules thing for some reason. I don't know why. It just that's how I thought
Yeah.
of it. But
Yeah.
like
Maybe I was subconsciously influenced by him. I hope not, but it's possible. It's possible
anyway,
there'd be no 25 replies if there had been no 12 rules for life. I don't know.
right. So I guess we kind of touched on it in the beginning of the interview, but I guess since the book is won't be out until next February, uh, tell us what the book is about. Obviously, it's about
Yeah.
having, like, like conservative, like trying to argue with conservative minded people, and like that not all lefties are as bad as they seem.
Sure. So the book does a couple of things. The bulk of the book is, as the subtitle suggests, responses to a series of arguments that are frequently made by conservatives. So,
Hmm.
for example, the Nazis were socialist, or like transgender people are turning your children trans, or immigrants are going to destroy the fabric of the country. All of those. It goes through long, or the minimum, or you raise the minimum wage, you'll kill jobs. It goes through all of the arguments and explains why we on the left reject those arguments.
Hmm.
But the other thing is that it does is it kind of explains more generally how conservative arguments tend to work and how to effectively respond to them, even ones that aren't in the book. Like there's no argument on guns in the book, for example,
Hmm.
which I just forgot to do. And also 26 conservative arguments would have not worked as well as 25. But
25 and a half, maybe.
25 and a half, yeah. So revised edition. Well, but
When the thing comes out in paperback, then you can just put that in.
actually, it's original. It's going straight into paperback. We're not doing a hardcover.
Gotcha.
This one's going straight into paperback because it's cheaper, and the theory of the publisher was that more people would buy it if it's the kind of book that they. I don't know. They wanted it in paperback. Okay. Shame because I like hardcovers, but whatever.
Same.
But so the what I do is I talk about how conservatives tend to make arguments across these, like, what do these things have in common? These 25,
Mhm.
what does abortion have to do with taxation, have to do with, and what I talk about how there's this framework that is often used by conservatives that was identified by Albert Hirschman in his book, The Rhetoric of Reaction, where
Mhm.
he talks about perversity, futility, and jeopardy, where conservative talking points tend to be like, this thing that the left wants is going to undermine all of civilization. It's not going to accomplish anything, and it's going to hurt the very people it tries to help. It's going to be futile. It's going to put everything in jeopardy, and it's going to be perverse. So, and when you start to understand how conservative arguments tend to use these same bits of rhetoric on every issue. Oh, the Green New Deal, it's going to destroy everything we, oh, the immigrants, they're going to destroy everything we, oh, transgender people, they're going to destroy everything we, you see that, like, conservatism is often like some change is happening, some move towards greater justice, some uprising by people, whether it's, and you see the same conservative rhetoric during the civil rights movement,
Mhm.
where, oh, they're going to do all these protesters, all these Vietnam protesters, all these civil rights activists are destroying the fabric of the country. It's all coming unraveled. So what I do is I show that conservatism has this stock set of things that it does, and oftentimes they're kind of moral panics where they identify some enemy that is actually not very strong. They're actually usually pretty weak people, and they're like, this enemy is the source of all our problems. And so I show what's common to those conservative arguments in addition to refuting the specific ones.
Nice. That's one of the good things to look forward to. Um, I guess what was the I have to look at my paper. So
Yeah.
because I'm just prepared, so that's why if I'm looking down, it's just because I'm looking at the questions that I've
I
written,
yeah.
pre-prepared.
I no, I
Uh,
don't. Well, I do interviews every week, and I don't write down questions, which leaves me in the uncomfortable position of sometimes having a moment where if I have a brain fart, like there's
mhm.
nothing I can look at to like help me. Uh, I'm like out on my own. It's very stupid because I don't do that kind of
Yeah.
preparation.
Well, for me, being autistic, I have several brain farts,
Mm,
so it's like I have to write everything down, and so in
sure,
case I forget, I could just look down and see,
sure.
okay, this is what the next question is. But I guess what ties into that question there, I guess, what would like you want readers who have read your previous work, which I'm just going to hold this up because this is the
Yeah,
previous work that I
MySpace
have
Socialist.
of yours. How long has this book been out, by the way? It's been 3 years, 4
December
years.
2019, it was published.
So yeah, yeah, I got it kind of 3 years late, but hey, I read a library copy, so.
No, no.
um, so I guess from that book, what would you want readers who have read that book there to come over and read in this one?
Oh, well, see, that book is like the positive, and this one's the negative.
Yeah.
So, I wrote the positive first because I've kind of gotten a reputation for being a very negative writer because I write all these critical articles about people like Matt Taibbi and about Jordan Peterson and all them people. So
Sagar
I
and
write
Jetty.
I write these takedown articles, and I actually wanted to write the first book. I wanted to be a kind of, okay, well, we're not just against things. Here's what we're for. Here's the
Mhm,
basics of where socialists are coming from, what our vision is, what it's grounded in. And then I say in the introduction to this book, okay, well, if you want the positive program, go to that book. Come to
mhm,
this second book if you want the debunkings. If you
mhm.
want me to go through and go, this is why this argument's stupid. This is why this argument's stupid. This is why this argument's stupid. And I think that's actually very valuable because a lot of people know that an argument is wrong without quite being able to articulate why it's wrong. And it can be frustrating when you're like, I think that what that guy's saying is not true, but I'm not sure why. So I am trying to, in this book, equip people with an understanding of why conservative talking points are wrong. So in their day-to-day life, they don't have to have that sense of frustration.
Very on point, as I'm going to say. Very on point, Mr. Robinson. Um, I guess let's see the next question. Oh, this one's just for you directly because this is just my curious thing. Like I'm a creature of habit. I consume different left podcasts and blogs just to keep myself informed.
Hmm.
So I will ask this question to you. Is there anyone or anything out there that you are listening to or watching, like a YouTube stream or something that's like influencing you at the moment in your writing?
Not really. I don't watch many YouTube
Oh,
streams because I don't have time. I mean, I list in the there's I think an appendix to Why You Should Be a Socialist that is called a Left Media Diet, where I go through and list some of the people that I like and respect, and just to give people some things to watch. I don't really have time to watch much stuff. I unfortunately, because I don't listen to audiobooks or podcasts. I'm just writing all the time. It's something I'd like to do more when I have
mhm,
some free time to just consume and enjoy content rather than producing it.
right. Um, yeah, like I said, I'm a creature of habit. I've been on this like since COVID started, like when we've been in this pandemic and we've been social distancing and whatnot. I went on this sort of journey, so to speak, of consuming all the good that I think is leftist
Mm.
content. And I think I've done pretty good. I mean,
Yeah,
Jacobin's the big one, current
yeah,
affairs, Majority Report, obviously,
yeah. He's good.
TYT.
Yeah,
And again, I live in Kansas City, so there really isn't much leftist content here.
sure,
So
sure.
I mean, we're a deep red state, so it's kind of difficult.
Hmm.
But I guess the last question, because we are at our hour, I'm glad we made it because I tend to space these questions out so we can meet the full hour, and I'm always worried that if I reach the end of my interview questions and the hour's not up, it's like, okay, I got to improvise, I got to just think of
Yeah,
something, you know.
time goes by
So
quickly though.
yeah, it does. So I guess where the last thing I would say, where do you see yourself and the magazine going
Oh,
in a few years? Let's
well,
say number
yeah.
like 5 years.
Well, I mean, I want the magazine to grow. We're still very small. We still only got 4,000 subscribers. I would love to have us be a larger magazine with a larger staff. What we're trying to do right now is to build our circulation so that we can then build our staff out so that we can have, instead of just me being the art director and the graphic designer,
Mhm,
have an actual art director and actual graphic designer, have staff writers, have something closer to the structure of what Jacobin or the Baffler or the Nation has, where they have
mhm.
like more than a couple of people. And I actually don't really want to be the editor in chief of Current Affairs in 5 years. I would love to find someone else who can do that. Um,
Right.
because I'm a writer and writers aren't very good managers, is something that I've discovered. So I would love to still write for Current Affairs, still be very actively involved in it. But I've never really wanted to be in charge of it.
Right.
So I would like to first grow Current Affairs, and then I would like to step back a little bit and focus on some of the book projects that I have in mind. And I've got a whole list of them. I got tons of books to write.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine. Like, there's a big part of me that wishes maybe on that book list is a history of leftist journalism and broadcasting, or
Oh, that's it.
what we
Oh, now I'm
call
gonna have to write another one. That should go on the list. That's good. That's a good idea. Damn.
it's a
Well, you're
I
gonna have to write
have
that one. I don't have time. You're gonna have to write that
I'm an
one.
amateur writer. I have to like, prepare myself a year in advance. But anyway, I mean, with me as a part-time blogger, I'd probably knock something out in like 10 days. That's a joke, by the way. You can laugh. And you also work for the Guardian at some point, right? Until that
Oh yeah,
infamous.
until they fired me. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up. I mean, I thought about bringing it up because I watched
Yeah.
that interview you did with Michael Walker on the Bar Media. And what really baffled me is that again, you mentioned that the Guardian is reader supported, and yet they get like a grant from a rich dead guy. Like, I mean, come on. Anyway,
It's
but
yeah, no, yeah. Well, that's a shame because I liked writing for the Guardian. I liked them a lot. They put out a lot of good stuff. But I
yeah,
just thought it was a terrible decision, obviously,
yeah,
because
yeah. I mean,
I like me. I don't think I'm anti-Semitic. Whatever.
no, no, not at all, not at all. I mean, you just had a position on Israel, and it went the other way. I mean, you had a position, and they didn't share it, obviously.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, what are you gonna do? I mean, you've moved on, and you've done great
that's
things
right.
since then. So, all right, Mr. Robinson, or I should just call you Nathan, right? I mean, do you
Um,
want to be addressed as Mr.
you,
Robinson because
no,
you're a
no,
big
I should
hotshot
be.
CEO, or I don't want to say
I should
CEO,
be.
but
No, no, just Nathan. Nathan's good. Nathan's good.
okay,
Just not Nate. The only thing I
Nate.
don't like is Nate. There are some people, and it's just a few people who just insist on Nate, and I just,
You just like cringe and you
I
ball your
just,
fist up and you're like,
I don't really
it's
care. But
Nathan.
it's not my name. It's a different name.
For me, like my full name is Jonathan, but I just go by John. One, because it's easier to say. And if you call me by my full first name, I probably will think that I'm in trouble.
Jonathan.
Yeah, then I'm in
Jonathan.
trouble. I'm in trouble.
Yeah. No, it's not
I know
good.
probably from doing this interview, I'm probably gonna light some people. I'm probably gonna, I don't know. I don't really get a lot of backlash from doing these interviews. I mean, the thing, like I said, I'm a big fan of left media, some of it anyway. I mean, I wish we had
Mhm.
another hour so we could
Yeah.
just go straight into like
Sure.
some of the articles that you've written that have been controversial that I've found
Yeah.
quite entertaining. I mean, there's
Well.
some people that cough cough Sagar and Jetty. Um, uh, but we could save
Yeah.
that for
I
another
don't even want
episode.
to touch that
I
right now.
mean,
Okay. All right.
I mean, what are they gonna do? Okay, so plugging away. Where can they find you, basically?
Well, currentaffairs.org is the website of the magazine, and they should go to currentaffairs.org/magazine to find out more about our beautiful print edition. See, I've got this whole spiel down.
Yeah,
And then they go to currentaffairs.org/subscribe to subscribe to the magazine. Patreon.com/currentaffairs is where they'll find our podcast. And then I personally am at Nathan J. Robinson on Twitter. I do
which I
that at
follow you. I follow you on Twitter, and
the
you friended me on Facebook, so
yeah.
that's good. So,
Okay.
all right, Nathan.
Well, it's been fun, John.
It's great.
Nice
It's
to meet
been
you.
really fun. Nice to meet you too, and
All the
good
best.
luck on the next issue.
Have a good afternoon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. All right, that was Nathan J. Robinson of Current Affairs Magazine. You could go buy his book if you want to, Why You Should Be a Socialist. It's been out for, I think, like 3 years at this point, so who's counting? We don't have any chats, so I'll just end it here. His new book, Responding to the Right, Brief Replies, 25 Conservative Arguments, comes out on February 14th of 2023, so at least 2 months from now. And with that, I am done for the year. This is the last podcast interview until January. So have a happy holiday. Left is best. Rest in power, Michael Brooks. And I will see you in 2023. Peace.